As we all know, 7.8 billion people live on one side of this line that you see. There are two parallel realities existing side by side, all based on straight lines. The world as we know it consists of cities, villages, and settlements. But there are also areas that are way less dense in population. These straight lines divide these two alternate realities, one where life is hustling and bustling, and the other where it is as slow as a tortoise running a marathon. It's uncanny how these lines divide such areas, as if somebody drew them by hand, making sure these alternate realities stay separate from each other. In this video, we will tell you about these almost human-looking lines and what places these two lines divide. One of these two lines is in Africa. One side of the line represents the African coast, consisting of a semi-arid belt that wraps itself around the continent. And on the other side of the line exists the Sahara Desert, one of the least populated areas around the globe. Several years pass by in a row without a single drop of rain in the Sahara Desert. The average temperatures of this desert are completely unsuitable for human habitation. It shouldn't really come as a surprise that nobody lives in this desert. But what's more strange is the other line, because it divides the United States of America. And if you look closely enough, you'll realize that the line that divides populated America and unpopulated America runs exactly from south to north. Just west of many population centers like San Antonio and Fort Worth, these cities literally define the borders of North America. On the other hand, if you look at satellite images of the United States, you can see the fact with your own eyes. To the east of these border cities, there is an almost unbroken chain of light all the way to the Atlantic Ocean and the East Coast. To the west, there are only dispersed islands of light in the Sea of Darkness, and if you proceed from east to west in this region, you immediately recognize the big difference in the distances between gas stations and general stores. This invisible line that divides the developed east from the rural west follows the 98 meridian of longitude and drastically divides the American people. About 80% of all Americans, or 260 million people, live east of this line, which means that 20% who live west of the line are only 1 in every 5 Americans. Take Alaska, for example, which is a massive territory that makes up the majority of American territory, and strangely enough, this vacant territory west of the border is home to more people than Canada. It includes the entire state of California, which is the most populous in the country. However, California is an exception because the majority of the region's population lives in the state's westernmost tip near the Pacific Ocean. Suppose you draw a border between San Diego to the south and Portland and Seattle to the north. In that case, you are going to discover that around 50 million Americans live on the narrow strip of coastline between the Pacific Ocean and the Cascade and Sierra Nevada mountains. The American interior, spanning about a third of the United States land and slightly smaller than the European Union, includes all 8 states and a significant part of 9 territories. However, only 30 million people inhabit this vast territory, or 9% of the American population. This population is comparable to New York City's population on the East Coast. Most of these 30 million people are distributed in urban areas, with about a third living in Phoenix, Denver, and Las Vegas. Over half the population is spread across the 8 largest urban areas. If we exclude these 8 urban areas, the rest of the region is home to fewer people than Los Angeles and San Diego in California alone. The United States distribution is characterized by a dense population in the east and a sparsely populated region in the west. This is evident in various aspects of American society and civilization, such as distance between McDonald's restaurants. The line dividing America is also evident in the diversity of plant species, with fewer species west of it. John Wesley Powell, a geologist and the first director of the United States Geological Survey, recognized the reality of this line in 1878. John Wesley Powell observed that it rained more in the east than in the west, leading him to draw a line at the 100th meridian longitude to mark the boundary between the rainy east and the arid west. This line is close to the current line, which is seen on modern maps of annual precipitation levels in the United States. As you move westward across North America, annual precipitation decreases dramatically, with Dallas receiving 96 centimeters of rain a year and El Paso receiving only 66 centimeters. John Wesley Powell identified one of the geographical explanations behind this North American natural law as the Great Rocky Mountains, the third longest mountain chain in the world, stretching over 4,830 kilometers across the continent. These high peaks sit on top of clouds from the Pacific Ocean, blocking most of them, which in turn blocks rain. This effect is called the rain shadow. The Rocky Mountains and the Cascade Range create a divide between major cities like Seattle and Portland, Oregon, and the East Coast. These mountains create drier environments in the east, preventing moisture from the Pacific from penetrating. In Washington state, the narrow coastal plains exposed to the Pacific receive 93 centimeters of rainfall yearly, while the small town of Mattawa receives only 11 centimeters. Las Vegas, Nevada is known for its dry climate, similar to the Sierra Nevada, which is higher than the Rocky Mountains. The west coast of North America is favorable for large amounts of rainfall, with human population centers from northern Washington to San Francisco Bay. Southern California, which contains major population centers, is heavily irrigated and supported by a complex system of aqueducts and pipelines that bring water from rainy regions. The continental interior of North America has few alternative sources for moisture or fresh water, mostly limited to rivers or snowmelt. On the continent's eastern side lies the Appalachian Mountains, which challenge the vast regions to the west. The highest mountain, Mount Mitchell, is less than 2,042 meters high, but not enough to block moisture from the Atlantic Ocean. This allows large-scale agriculture without the need for irrigation. The Atlantic storms did not bring enough moisture to the western plains beyond the 98 and 100th meridian longitude lines, leading to increased rainfall in the eastern United States. This resulted in less usable fresh water in one-third of the United States, causing less drinking water and less water for agriculture. Farms west of the 100th meridian are larger and less productive than those east, making it more difficult for the region to sustain large human populations. The line dividing North America's wet and dry halves is shifting eastward with global warming, which is expected to increase soon. This will dramatically affect the climate of cities like San Antonio and Fargo, as well as many areas considered rainfall safe will suffer from rainfall deficits. Farmers in this region will find it more difficult to adopt irrigation techniques, leading to economic damage and forced abandonments of crops like corn and switching to drought-resistant crops like wheat. The American West has experienced several rainfall deficits, with most regions relying on fresh water supplied by the Colorado River over 100 years. For the first time in recorded history, the Colorado River is running dry, and the U.S. federal government has restricted states from obtaining water from the river. This decision led to water scarcity for nearly 40 million Americans in the American West. Hall, a highly intelligent geologist and scientist, argued for a redivision of states based on hydrographic basins where precipitation was collected, aiming to divide governance of regions with scarce water resources into different states. However, politicians in Washington and the American people ignored Paul's science-based recommendations and warnings, and the situation will continue to worsen. State and political interest in the various basins in the American West will exacerbate the crisis. To be useful to our world, it is essential to keep science at the edge of our lives, and we should share ideas and research on scientific topics. So, subscribe to our channel so we can keep on doing so, and don't forget to like the video and tell us your thoughts in the comments.